What's going on, everyone? Mike Kadlick and Taylor Kyles here for CLNS Media, back with another episode of Pat's Daily. Myself and Taylor Kyles just got back from Foxborough in the burning heat. Just recorded a ton of videos for the Patriots Press Pass YouTube channel. So make sure you head over here, rate, review, subscribe, and subscribe to the show or the podcast rather, because we will have a ton of content coming out live from Foxborough. It's a mailbag episode today. Instead of Mailbag Monday, it's Mailbag Tuesday. And we're going to get to all your Patriots questions in a minute. But first, Taylor, we have to get to some Patriots news because there's been a ton of Patriots news today, even though it is a dog days of summer Tuesday. Brandon Aiyuk, 49ers wide receiver Brandon Aiyuk, who has been sort of in the news this whole offseason, has requested trades and then rescinded trade requests. And sometimes he wants to go and sometimes that. We've talked about Brandon Aiyuk a million times, but today, officially, NFL Network's Mike Garafolo reported that Aiyuk has requested a trade. So Aiyuk has requested a trade, and also Josina Anderson has reported that the Patriots have been involved in trade requests for Brandon Aiyuk. So Patriots have called. Aiyuk wants to be out. Taylor, overall, 30,000-foot view, what do you make of this news? And should the Patriots go after Brandon Aiyuk?
Yeah, so one, let me put the numbers up here just so we have something to kind of go off of, because Brandon Aiyuk, I know there's been some debate over whether he's worthy of some kind of big money deal. Some contracts you kind of think of in terms of trades and then guys signed to big deals were like Tyreek Hill and A.J. Brown when he was moved on from the Titans. But Brandon Aiyuk is one of the best receivers in the NFL. Like, he doesn't really have any weaknesses. If you look on Matt Harmon's reception, he does a great job over there. Yeah. Basically, you can run literally every route in the route tree. Like, the entire thing was green, looked like a damn Christmas tree. It's beautiful. He's a really good receiver, and this is considering he's on an offense with a ton of other options as well, and he's been able to be highly productive. You're talking George Kittle, Christian McCaffrey, Deebo, obviously, but of that group, Brandon Aiyuk is the best route runner, one of the best route runners in the NFL, period. So there's plenty of arguments to be made. He's also only 26 years old.
Yep.
So if you want a guaranteed, all-pro caliber talent at wide receiver, then yeah, I think you go after Brandon Aiyuk, especially considering this Patriots offense is pretty young when you look at what their long-term outlook is at a lot of these offensive spots, especially the skill positions. Like, you got Drake May, then Javon Baker, Pop Douglas, and Jalen Polk are really who you think come to the top receivers are going to be at this point. And then obviously Hunter Henry's in long-term, but you'd hope that like a Jaheim Bell can kind of rise to prominence there as well. Yeah. If you get a Brandon Aiyuk, it's not a whole lot of projection. Like, you can speed up Drake May's development because he has that true elite number one where he can look to that guy in all those one-on-one matchups and know that he's going to win. And it kind of speeds up your playoff hopes as well, because now it's not just about Drake May. You kind of have somebody who takes some of the burden off him whenever he enters the lineup. Now, this is where things start to get a little more murky. One, Mike Garafolo made a very good point. The 49ers are no strangers to these situations where players want out. I know Deebo Samuel's been in this category. Robbie Gould's been in this category as well. These guys are like, no, I want to be traded. I'm not happy. The 49ers do not budge. They are very, very tough to try to get off of their spot when it comes to that. So one, it's not even that realistic that he gets moved at all. All right, Aiyuk doesn't even have any leverage. He's on a fifth-year option, and then the 49ers can franchise tag him in his sixth season. They have all the control. So if you want to talk about prospective deals, you could look at, again, A.J. Brown, who was dealt for an 18th overall pick and the 101st overall picks. Or if the 49ers say, you know what, I want a king's ransom, then you look at maybe the Tyreek Hill deal. Before he got his mega contract, he was acquired for a first-round pick, a second-round pick, a fourth-round pick, and then future fourth and sixth-round picks. Now, it's going to be different with the Patriots. This is a team that could end up picking inside like the top 10, top 15, almost guaranteed it feels like top 15, but even top 5, you really have no idea. So where my head went was, okay, it's kind of that like mystery box. Do you want this thing where you know exactly what you're going to get, or do you want to go through the gamble that is the NFL draft? Well, let's look at some of the first-round receivers from the past few years. You got classes where it's like, yeah, you got your Henry Ruggses and your Jerry Judys, but in Brandon Aiyuk's class, they also had CeeDee Lamb and Justin Jefferson. Again, all pro talent. You look at the next year, Jamar Chase, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, Darius Toney obviously is what he is. Rashad Bateman hasn't really lived up to expectations. But again, these are 3 all-pro caliber players, at the very worst Pro Bowl caliber players.
Yep.
2022, a lot of guys who just went to bad situations, unfortunately. Drake London, Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, all guys who have balled out. Very good receivers. They just haven't had very good quarterback play.
Garrett Wilson might be my favorite young player in the NFL. Like, that guy's awesome. He just hasn't been able to put it together with like Aaron Rodgers is here, for example. I'm sorry to cut you off going on your rant, but like that kid's nasty. So we shouldn't even say he's in a bad situation, but he's one of the best players in football.
100%. And then like Jahan Dotson, you're hoping that maybe he gets more production and can really kind of steady his career out with Jaden Daniels. Treylon Burks, it feels like the Titans still don't really know how to use him. That's a weird situation. Then moving on, 2023 was kind of a weird year for the receiver position, but still Jackson Smith and the Jigba, Quentin Johnston, one of those misses, but Zay Flowers and Jordan Addison, 2 excellent young players. And then obviously this year, you got Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, and Rome Odunze. And if the Patriots could get anybody of that caliber, again, with one of those top 10 picks, this offense is looking a lot more loaded than it does right now. Even Brian Thomas Jr., Xavier Worthy, Xavier Legette, guys who give you a lot of explosiveness. So I say all of that to say, if you want to talk about getting a guy like Brandon Aiyuk, you're also taking the chance on potentially missing out at a guy who's going to be cost controlled right within your range with probably one of maybe 2 picks you'd have to give up for Brandon Aiyuk on top of having to pay him. So yeah, I like the idea of having a guaranteed guy who you can.
Sorry,
my dad's on like. But like a guaranteed baller like Brandon Aiyuk, who it's like, yes, this is a top 5 wide receiver in the NFL, but you already have Drake May on a rookie contract and you take on the money. But if you end up with a top 10 or 15 pick, you can get a guy of that similar caliber anyway, and then you don't have to pay him all that money, which, I wouldn't start pinching pennies necessarily because you do have Drake May. But I don't know. I'd rather keep the draft capital if you want to be this draft and develop team and you want to build through the draft and all these things that they were saying. I appreciate that they've been in pursuit of Brandon Aiyuk and tried to see what the situation is. But I also wouldn't just give up whatever the 49ers want just to get him in the building.
Man, I continue to go back and forth on this. And from this show that I've been team go get Brandon Aiyuk the whole time, just because I think that, having Drake May's development and, how important it is for him to come in here and, truly be the next franchise quarterback. You need to do everything you possibly can to make that happen. And that goes from not throwing him into the fire as fast as you want to, and maybe trying to, kind of pulling him back a little bit and making sure that he's 100% ready to play. And that also includes surrounding him with top tier talent, not only at the wide receiver position, but also on the offensive line. And so a guy like Brandon Aiyuk is proven. These guys who are in 2025's wide receiver class, they might be cheap for 4 years, but they're not proven yet. Brandon Aiyuk is one of the best wide receivers in football. He can be that true alpha number 1 player. So there were people in my mentions today saying he wasn't that. I found that absolutely laughable. He is a stud. And so I understand.
Chris, I feel like there's not a lot of people watching specifically Aiyuk. They watch the 49ers, but if you watch Aiyuk, I feel like your eyes will be opened.
Definitely. You see Aiyuk and Kittle and Samuel and McCaffrey, and you see all those guys, and it's like, oh, he's just a product of that whole system. It's like, no, he's just another great addition to that system. The kid's a stud. And so I understand, yes, you have to trade all of this capital, and then you have to put resources in to actually pay him. At the end of the day, I think it's going to be worth it. So yeah, players cost money, but you have to, pay good players good money. So I do understand the other side of it, where if you look at all the wide receivers, there is a good hit rate over the last 5 years. Wide receiver has become a very deep position. Alex Barth talks about this, about how with the running back position and all the running backs are kind of the same, and that's why it gets devalued. Barth continues to wonder if that's going to end up happening with wide receiver, because there are so many, you can just wait on them. This is kind of the perfect example of that, where do you go get Aiyuk, or do you just wait for this next class because you can hit on it? And then say you hit next year on a quote unquote true wide receiver 1, and you also hit on Jalen Polk and Javon Baker, then you have a really, really good wide receiver core around these guys.
Keion
Boutte too. We'll see what happens. We'll touch on him in a second when we get through our Patriots news.
Another one there still is also the wide receiver market in terms of guys that might be available next offseason, like T. Higgins. We know he's probably going to play on the franchise tag, and I think they're going to franchise tag him again, try to get something in terms of trade value, but you're probably not going to get more than like a 3rd round pick, because everybody knows that you're not serious about retaining him. So T. Higgins, CeeDee Lamb, I don't know what the Cowboys are doing, but it's starting to seem like he could actually hit the market, which you don't really see with guys of his caliber. But that's another guy who's in that upper echelon, like really top tier wide receivers. If you want maybe more of a short-term guy who you know is a difference maker, but is kind of towards the end of his career while, Drake may still figuring things out, Amari Cooper, Brandon Cooks, Stephon Diggs is trying to have a career year right now, so he can earn himself one final deal. So, I mean, Aiyuk, I think, is in a different category than all of those guys. I don't want to lump them in together, but there will also probably be some good wide receivers available next offseason on top of the draft. So, more so kind of case against getting Aiyuk, although again, like he's such a good player. I'm not mad. If they can find a way to do it, by all means. But if we're talking like a first round pick, again, a potential top 10, 15 pick, and then you're probably also going to have to give up like a third or a fourth. I don't know.
It's definitely steep
until I'm proven otherwise. But I mean, I trust your front office and your coaching staff. Do what you've been saying you were going to do.
Right. It's something to keep an eye on, though, as we mentioned, as Josina Anderson reported, the Patriots were involved. So we'll keep an eye on it as the weeks continue on. You mentioned the staff, Taylor. So let's get into one other piece of Patriots news where there was a little bit of a front office shuffle this morning as the Patriots announced some changes and basically some title changes to their front office, where Matt Groh is now the director of player personnel. Alonzo Highsmith, who came over from, I believe, Green Bay, or Cleveland. I think he worked in both places at one point with this Elliott Wolf front office kind of crew. He comes over. He is now listed as a senior personnel executive. And the big one is Patrick Stewart. He is now the director of pro personnel, taking over for Steve Cargile, who left to go to the Texans. So some important roles and titles being put in place. Titles, something that Gerard Mayo says the new era of Patriots, actually put some weight behind. So important to see these guys sort of get into their place, because when Elliott Wolf was sort of moved to GM, but he was keeping his director of scouting title, like it kind of got murky there for a second. We didn't really know who was doing what, but now before the season, week before training camp, these seem to get ironed out. So thoughts quickly on just the Patriots sending out this release today and giving their front office guys official titles.
Yeah, nothing really new with Alonzo Highsmith. It's really just we know what his title is, but he was one of my favorite people who was added to the fold. He and Elliott Wolf have been like thick as thieves for years. They came up together. So there's a lot of trust there. He also spent a couple seasons at Miami, and they had like back-to-back, I think, the top 10 recruiting classes.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, he was like the general manager of the University of Miami football for the last few years. That's right. Yeah,
like this is a guy who's proven at multiple levels at respected organizations. Obviously, Miami, all the history they have in college football, and then in the NFL with the Browns. Didn't have as much success as you'd like to see, but still, in terms of player acquisition, they weren't really hurting or anything. It's just the QB play has been so bad. And then obviously Green Bay and coming up through that system, says a lot on its own. Then Patrick Stewart was someone who we knew was very involved in the scouting process. I feel like it was involved with the quarterbacks as well. You'd always hear that Patrick Stewart, whenever it wasn't the entire contingent of like Elliott Wolf and Gerard Mayo, I think they sent him on some individual assignments. So writing was kind of on the wall there with Steve Cargile now reuniting with Nick Caserio in Houston. Just good for him. None of this is really surprising, but now we actually have things official. And two other notes, Troy Brown and Joe Kim were not listed in the announcement, but Mike Reese clarified that is because they're in skills development. So I don't think they're actually listed in that capacity, but they are still going to be on the coaching staff.
Yeah, Patriots, again, additionally, on top of the front office announcement, officially put out their list of their full coaching staff, announced 29 coaches, Taylor. So a massive coaching staff compared to what Bill Belichick used to hold here. And yeah, like you said, Troy Brown, Joe Kim, still involved, still heavily involved in the team, but they are, again, in the skills development department, not technically coaches. So one more piece of Patriots news before we get into our mailbag, Taylor, is Keion Boutte. We did a full video on Keion Boutte, so make sure to keep your eyes on the Patriots Press Pass channel, and we did that live from Foxborough today, so you can check that out. But just quickly, for live listeners who haven't seen or want to get our quick thoughts on it, the former LSU wide receiver had his charges dropped by the state of Louisiana today. If you remember earlier in the offseason, he was charged with online gambling underage, I believe, and then also computer fraud, which was all tied together. He was arrested down in Baton Rouge at one point this offseason, but apparently those charges were now dropped today by the state of Louisiana. So he is basically all clear. Mike Reese added to this a little bit that the NFL is still sort of investigating it, but as of now, Boutte is allowed to participate in all team activities. So again, if the charges are dropped, it looks like steer clearing for Keion Boutte. So a guy who was at one point a first round talent, fell to the 6th round last season for a variety of reasons. Patriots bring him in, had a strong camp, fell off a little bit, obviously gets into some trouble this offseason, but now seems to be clear, head clear, crystal clear heading into training camp, coming off of as well a good offseason program. So just quick thoughts on that, Taylor, before we get into the mailbag.
I just hope he capitalizes on this opportunity, man.
Yeah.
Like, he got these other young guys. Clearly, he's not one of the more prominent members of their plan, but as we saw, that talent is still there. We saw it last summer where it was kind of around this time, particularly in training camp, where it felt like every day he was making some crazy kind of play, but the consistency wasn't there. And I think that was a big reason he didn't see the field last season, despite the Patriots kind of desperately needing people to step up for that wide receiver core. There's not a whole lot we can add because we've discussed he had that really strong day where he's making contested catches, especially near the sideline, which is an area where he struggled in that obviously season opener. Yeah, I was thinking of TV. But we saw, again, he's got to put it together and be able to adjust to the pro game and obviously adjust to a brand new offense as well. But, I mean, Jacoby Brissett's new, Drake May's new. Everybody's got to start to earn some kind of rapport and some playing time. And considering that X spot, the whole reason he got his opportunity was because Tyquan Thornton was MIA. Jalen Reagor wasn't really doing anything too impressive, but really it was him who stood out at that outside boundary position, taking advantage of one-on-one matchups. So I really hope he can be another young guy that you can start looking forward to watching develop in this offense, because if the young talent does pay off, then I think that the perception of this receiving core will look very different in the near future, especially with a guy like Drake May who can access the entire field and make all these guys better. But, at the end of the day, it's just going to come down to him because we know he can be a really good player, but he's got to put the work in like a Jalen Polk. We've seen like how maniacal he is, like a Javon Baker, and just seize the opportunity.
Yeah, this is a very fluid wide receiver room right now, Taylor. Obviously, we're talking Aiyuk trade today. We're talking Booty getting off on his charges, coming off of a solid offseason program. 2 rookies in Polk and Baker who were, expected to make the team, obviously. And then KJ Osborne is a guy who you bring in this offseason. Then you draft 2 guys. And you obviously have Juju and Tyquan, guys who are sort of on that roster bubble that could easily make the team and could easily get cut. So it's going to be fun. It's going to be interesting to watch over the next 6 weeks, 7 weeks as we get through training camp in the season. So we'll obviously have you covered there again on Patriots Press Pass the whole time. We're going to get to your mailbag. We put out for questions today on Twitter. You guys asked a bunch of them. Ask them in the chat as well. We'll get to as many as possible. But before we do that, a quick word from our friends at Game Time. We'll be right back.
There's nothing better during the summer than experiencing a sunny afternoon at the ballpark, or maybe a nice summer evening, catching a ball game live in person, not streaming, not on your phone, not on the radio, not on the TV. I remember driving down from Maine every summer. It was a big deal. We get tickets to see the Red Sox at Fenway Park. And I just remember seeing the green grass as you'd walk up through the tunnel. It was like heaven. And I want you to have the same feeling. So go download the Game Time app and go see a game. Game Time is an authorized ticket marketplace of Major League Baseball, so it's really easy to use. You can get your tickets faster and easier. Plus, as you get closer to the first pitch, the prices on Game Time actually go down. They have killer last-minute deals. They have the lowest price guarantee, and you can check out the view from your seats. Now, it's really easy. You just go to your phone, you download the Game Time app, you scan it, and you can see there are great seats to the Sox and the Yankees, or if you want that down-home minor league feeling, you can go see the Woo Sox or your favorite minor league club that's close to you. I go to Worcester and Polo Park. It is a great place to take the family to see a game. Very economical, too. Plus, Game Time also has great deals on the New England Revolution and Patriot preseason games. You can get last-minute deals and save up to 60% off on sports, concerts, comedy, and theater. You can save even more when you choose the section and you let Game Time choose the seats. You always get the lowest price guarantee, or Game Time will credit 110% of the difference. So take the guesswork out of buying MLB tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app today, create an account, and use code CLNS for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code CLNS for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today.
Yeah. All right. I can actually, I'll control Taylor. I have it on my end too, so I can kick it off and we can go with this first one here. And what are the odds Kendrick Bourne starts the season on PUP? I think this can be tied in a little bit with Kayshon Boutte and what we were just talking about with the whole wide receiver room as a whole. And we could sort of talk about that in general. But do you think Kendrick Bourne starts the season, or do you think he ends up on the PUP list?
I'd say PUP, one, he didn't participate all spring. Gerard Mayo did say that he expects everyone but Cole Strange to be around and participate once the summer does come. But that said, we've seen video of Kendrick Bourne running. It didn't look great. And, maybe he made some progress. We have no idea. I do want to say that. But at the same time, he's already kind of behind. And with the guy who just signed to a 3-year deal, I don't really think you need to rush him back out there. Let him take his time. You've got KJ Osborne. Their skill sets already kind of feel like they overlap, although Kendrick Bourne is better. And, you got that veteran presence, and KJ Osborne's also been in a similar system like this when he was in Minnesota. So, yeah, I definitely think that Kendrick Bourne is someone who's going to start on an injury list. And beyond that, it gives an opportunity for guys like Kayshon Boutte, maybe Tyquan Thornton if he starts to come on, to really prove themselves and kind of distinguish whether or not they deserve a roster spot and give you a better outlook at what you might have.
Yeah, I agree. I think they're better off saving the knee and putting him on PUP early, because it gives you another spot to potentially look at another one of these wide receivers if you don't think these next 6 weeks really give you enough. Bourne obviously throughout this offseason told Andrew Callahan that he's going to be ready for week 1, that he wasn't playing in the offseason program, but he was going to be ready for training camp. We'll see how that plays out next week. Again, I wouldn't rush him back, because you're right. He did sign for 3 years. It's not like he signed a 1-year deal where it's, a make or break type thing, sign for some money and then try and get yourself another contract next year. It's not like he necessarily needs the 17 games. So I think I'm with you. I think they give him those 4 weeks, get the knee 100% right. At least I say 4 weeks. It's at least 4 weeks if he goes on PUP. And so, yeah, we'll see what happens. But I think that they'd be better safe than sorry to not necessarily rush him back. Plus, again, it gives them extra time to kind of evaluate the room as a whole and look at what they have. So here's another question that I think is awesome, because it's like clever as hell. Hit by a car too is the name of the person on Twitter. So that's interesting.
You're okay, hit by a car.
But the question's fun. They say, I'm a time traveler from January 2025 and the Pats made the playoffs. What is your guess for how they did it? Taylor, I think I'm going to go first because I can be rather quick.
Good idea.
Drake May plays as well as CJ Stroud did last year, if not better. They trade for Brandon Aiyuk. Demario Douglas has 75 plus receptions. Jalen Polk has 1,000 yards. And the offense is outstanding and the defense plays just as good as they were. And somehow they back their way into the playoffs. So I think it's going to happen? Absolutely not. But I think the offense needs a lot, but I think those tangible pieces are there. We see it with the Brandon Aiyuk rumor. I see it with my own eyes. What we talked about earlier today, we were down in Foxborough with a guy like Jalen Polk, who I think could be a stud. And Drake May, if he can put all the pieces together, has a very high ceiling. It's just going to depend how early in his career he actually approaches that ceiling. But if it can all happen that early, yeah, I guess they can make the playoffs they can make the playoffs by season's end.
Yeah, I think it's going to start with great defense. Like, this has to be a top 10 unit who is great, especially like they have a better pass rush. I think they generate more turnovers. They give the offense more opportunities, something that was lacking for a lot of last season. So the defense has to lead the charge. I think at least you have decent special teams. I don't know how much we can expect from Jeremy Springer as a first-year special teams coordinator. Tom Quinn does have experience. I'm sure he'll be a lot of help. But we also mentioned our special teams breakdown. There's going to be a lot of change on that unit. But if the third phase of the game can be something that can help, potentially swing the momentum, like we saw with Marte Mapu, when he's forcing fumbles and you get those impact plays again, it's all about helping your offense and putting them in positions where, they don't have to take on too much and they're not having to come back from, 2-3 score deficits in the fourth quarter, and everyone in the stadium knows what's coming. Right. And then for the offense, I would say at least 3 of your rookies emerge as consistent contributors. Now, whether that's Jalen Polk, I feel like is the lock. I will be stunned if he's not a starter by week 1. But then after that, it's like, okay, maybe Javon Baker is that X receiver, that one-on-one guy who, he's not perfect every week, but he gives you something where the coaches are like, he's better than Tyquan. He's better than Jalen. He's better than Keion. Like, we have to put him out there, even if he makes mistakes. There's kind of like with Demario Douglas. Like, he wasn't perfect, but he was too good. You couldn't keep him out of the game. Maybe the coaching staff disagreed at times, but I think we all saw on the outside, like, I don't care if he's going to run the wrong route. He's the only one who's giving you explosiveness. Right. I do think Demario Douglas taking that next step will help. But I think in this offense, having that guy who can win in one-on-one matchups, based on what we saw from Van Pelt's scheme last year, will be huge. And then, if it's Caden Wallace and he is a right tackle and he's good for you and he's not a liability out there, he's at least solid. that's huge because it probably means the offensive line can run the ball well and they're not, horrible in pass protection. Maybe one glaring weak spot at left tackle potentially, but at least one of your edges is secure and it keeps them winning inside. Right. And obviously we hope that Drake May plays. I think that's like the easiest part. But I also think Jacoby Brissett with, Jalen, Polk, and Javon Baker actually giving you good production, I think that could also be enough to at least put you in position to capitalize on the good defense, solid at least special teams, and, just be able to pull out some games late.
I mean, you think about it that way too. I mean, look, Jacoby Brissett had a, I guess, career high at some points. Honestly, off the top of my head, I can't remember when he was at his best, but he played some pretty good football when he was in Indy. I don't think he's that anymore, but he can still win football games in this league. So if they get off to an okay start, again, I'm kind of brainstorming a path to the playoffs here, but if they get off to an okay start, Drake May continues to shine in in practice and things like that, and then maybe they lose one or two, they could still have a couple wins under their belt. May comes in and shines and then sneak into the back end of the playoffs. It all depends on how the rest of the AFC lines up too, because I mean, you can get in at 9-8, you can get in at 8-9 if you really had to. So it's not necessarily, look, I don't think they're going to be I don't think they're going to be a playoff team. I know you think they at least might, and that's probably their ceiling. But there is definitely a path there. I'm not going to say that they can't make it because I absolutely think they can.
And if Drake May is on the field, I think that he's going to be one of at least top 20. And I think that's based on talent alone, but also intelligence. If he's on the field, I think maybe you'll deal with some inaccuracy. Maybe that's a little all over the place. He's probably going to make some bad decisions, but you're expecting that. And also, you talk about the trade-off where he's going to make mistakes, but he's going to make some mistakes that veteran quarterbacks still make, and he's going to give you way more positive plays that there are some people on the planet that they simply can't do. So, I think if we see Drake May out there at all, I think that significantly helps their chances. But, of course, he's going to need the support from the supporting cast and coachings.
Definitely. Yeah. All right. So the defensive side of the football, a question I feel like we probably get every week, but we can answer it again because cornerback's important, and Christian Gonzalez is really, I guess he's not even really a lock because, again, he played great for those 3 games, but obviously got hurt for the rest of the season. But what are your expectations for Alex Austin Taylor? Is he cornerback 2? Is he cornerback 3 behind Jonathan Jones? How do you see that position playing out as we inch closer to the start of the season?
Yeah, I think that John Jones is locked in as that second cornerback.
Okay.
On top of the experience and the reliability. I mean, he really is your second best cornerback. Right. Obviously, we didn't see him in the spring. He seemed like he had some kind of off-season surgery. Should be okay, I think, by the start of the season. Obviously, we will see. But Jonathan Jones is your CB2 at that point, and this is part of the series that we're doing where we kind of talk about the cornerback battle. But there, it's okay. Is it Marcus Jones who emerges? And then maybe Jonathan Jones does stay outside. Is it Alex Austin? And then you bump Jonathan Jones back inside. I think it's truly wide open. Now, there are some guys, I think, like Marco Wilson, who probably don't have as much of a leg up. Isaiah Bolden, honestly, it's significant that he's been getting opportunities. You look at Alex Austin and Marco Wilson, they've kind of been rotating with that top defense and sometimes with the second team. But Isaiah Bolden's consistently been the starting slot corner. Part of that, as Gerard Mayo said, is just because they haven't had Marcus Jones or Jonathan Jones. He didn't explicitly say their names, but he said our slot corners haven't really been available. And those guys weren't available. So, the math starts to math. But I do think that Alex Austin is probably the guy who emerges. Also, just looking at reliability, like Marcus Jones coming off a pretty significant injury, hasn't been a guy who's been consistently available or just consistent on the field, frankly. Like last summer, we did see he was pretty up and down. And Alex Austin, he gave up some plays, a lot of red zone work where the margin for error is really small, but he's been competitive. I think more competitive than other bodies there. So I think Alex Austin probably ends up being your starter. Now, if they don't like the position, I could see them inquiring with Stephon Gilmore, who I know has been saying that he still wants to sign and thinks he's a starter. I would tend to agree. I think he'd be a great mentor along with Jonathan Jones in that room. But I'd say Alex Austin probably does have the leg up if we're talking about that third cornerback spot with Marcus Jones and Isaiah Bolden also, probably giving him a run for his money once everybody's healthy and active.
I think that's an interesting, and it's an interesting way to look at it, and it's the correct way to look at it, where Jonathan Jones is your number 2, second best corner, but where he plays is going to depend on your third and fourth best corner and kind of how they fit into the system, because you can trust him to play outside, to play inside, to kind of do, both and play all across the, play all across the back end of the defense. So it'll be interesting. And again, I think I would agree that right now Alex Austin probably has the leg up. I really liked what we saw from him in the offseason program. But I love the idea of Isaiah Bolden. I'm really starting to fall in love with him as a player and also what he can bring in the return game potentially as well. So I'm excited. There's a lot of young talent in that back end that, there's a bunch of good building blocks. Like Jonathan Jones is sort of I guess he's the old man in the room now, but he's sort of the leader of the bunch. Christian Gonzalez, though, super young. Austin, Bolden, Wilson. You talk about Marcus Jones as well. Marte Mapu as a safety. Like that whole, back end of the secondary, it'll be super fun and interesting to watch and kind of see how they play out. So I mentioned safeties, so I want to get your thoughts on this too, because I think this is someone, you mentioned Steph Gilmore's talking. He mentioned Justin Simmons the other day as well, as someone who could potentially be signed, who hasn't yet. So would the Patriots consider a real veteran free safety a la Justin Simmons? Do you think he's waiting for a contender? Do you think he could sign with the Patriots? And do you think that Jaylen Hawkins' emergence from what we saw in the offseason program could have anything to do with why they haven't signed a free safety in free agency?
Yeah, one, Jabril Peppers is a real veteran free safety. Like, I know that we still want him close to the line of scrimmage and doing all that stuff where he can affect the ground game, but like he's still very good in the role. And a lot of his biggest plays last season came when he was at safety. So I kind of want to dispel that, like, they don't have one on the roster. You just like somebody who, when, Jabril Peppers does bounce down, you can have somebody to kind of take that center field role. I do think that's probably going to be Jaylen Hawkins. That's what it looked like during the spring practices. I also went back and watched, I know we touched on this in the safeties preview as well, but with Jaylen Hawkins, he played actually under Dean Pease, who was Gerard Mayo's first defensive coordinator in the NFL. Actually took over for Duron Harmon as the Falcons free safety back in, it was 2022. So he can play the role. He's got good range. He's a bit inconsistent as a tackler. I think he's a solid last line of defense, but we've also seen the Patriots take guys like Jalen Mills, who were pretty big liabilities at times with their other teams, but he still had a pretty solid skill set. You saw him become more consistent once he got to New England. So if we can see that kind of thing with Jaylen Hawkins, who again showed he could be a starter, just wasn't with the Chargers because I think they needed depth because of Derwin James, but they didn't need him to be the top guy. I think then you're probably pretty well stocked, and you're hoping Marte Mapu, another guy that I think is in for potentially a big season. You're hoping that maybe he can give you some level of play in center field, kind of take over for the snaps you're losing from, Jalen Mills and Adrian Phillips. He didn't play a ton, but still.
Yeah, I look at a guy in Jabril Peppers who sort of took over in that free safety-ish role last year and played fine. And I've mentioned it a lot here, but it's like, you see that clip that he reshared a couple months ago with the Browns and how, he didn't want to play off the ball that far. They had him like 50 yards back at one point in the formation. And like, he can play back there though. Like he played well last year. I was fine with it. So I don't really necessarily think you have to go get a Justin Simmons. I like where I like where the entire defensive backfield is at. I don't think they, got burned last year as much as some people think they might have. Like, I think they're going to do just fine. Duggar's in the system another year. Pepper's obviously in the system another year, playing healthier. And then you're right, that emergence of Marte Mapu is really going to be huge for them. So I would just kind of
starter. Like, I feel like people think he's some rotational guy. He's not. Justin Simmons. Like,
yeah, right.
Third safety, and I think if he signs somewhere, he's going to be one of the top two starting guys. So I want to throw that in there as well. Like, this team is not a good fit for him.
No, I'm with you. I think they just let it ride. I mean, I think they'll be fine in that part of their secondary. I don't really see a need to go pay a guy like Justin Simmons, who, would probably come at a decently steep price, I guess, depending on, where his camp's at and things like that. If he's going to want to go sign for a Super Bowl contender, maybe he's just ring chasing anyway. But yeah, I don't see the fit. I think they're going to be just fine. I'll go to the chat for this one. Do you see Marcellus Dial having a chance to play on the field this year, or do you think he might just be a potential redshirt kind of guy?
Outside of injury, I'd be pretty stunned. I think he could contribute on special teams because he's a good tackler. He's physical, and he's got that like kind of diverse skill set that works really well on special teams. But unless you get, one of your top safeties or corners, I think they do want him to play corner, maybe add more to his plate as things go on, or if, the situation arises. But yeah, I just don't see, with all the bodies we just talked about at cornerback and then safety, again, you're probably talking about 4 guys who are going to be in that rotation. I just don't see where he fits in. And he's such a late round pick that I think he's someone you could kind of, either the Foxborough flu or maybe sneak him onto the practice squad. I don't love that, but I think they find a way to probably redshirt him unless he is like some kind of core special teamer.
You think a team would claim him if he got cut?
Maybe. Just because he's got the kind of like skill set where if a team wants another developmental kind of guy, I think he'd be, at least an intriguing prospect. Not a guarantee. I feel like we always have our darlings where you really like him, you don't want to expose him to waivers, and then no one's actually interested. But the opposite.
So we thought about Malik Cunningham last year.
Exactly. And then it's like, nope, the NFL has a lot of good players. There's a reason that teams are willing to risk these guys, but you never know. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if they lost him because they do have pretty good depth. But I'm not sure I see a path to the field on defense, at least this season.
Yeah. All right. Here's another quick one from the chat before we wrap it up with our two ones that were submitted beforehand. This one just quickly, and it's on top of the Aiyuk thing. I don't think this would do it, but no. Would you trade Judon a third and a fourth for Aiyuk and then have to pay him that, $27 to $30 million a year tax? Yeah. Yeah, I think so too. What if it was, no, I'm just spitballing here because I think that one's pretty obvious because again, the Judon thing, I'm totally fine using him as a trade piece. Like he's older. He's obviously coming off the injury, and if he's not in your plans for the future, you should get something for him instead of letting him walk. So absolutely. So you use that. I still think it would be like a second and a third. And I would probably do that, Judon, a second and a third as well. The only one that I think, and I don't want to call it untouchable because I would probably still end up doing the Aiyuk trade at the end of the day, but like I don't want to give up a first round pick for him if I don't have to next year because you mentioned it, probably top 10, top 15 pick if the Patriots finish as like a lot of analysts think they're going to. But yeah, paper waves. I think this one is way too light, and I don't think San Francisco would accept this at all.
Even Judon in a second, I'd think about it because if you're trading Judon, then it probably means you couldn't find a middle ground. So if the reports are true from Greg Bedard that he's not going to play, you're not really losing anything.
Right.
So you throw him in a second round pick, I'll give up a second round pick. That's okay.
Hell yeah.
Like it's going to be high. It's one of those Patriots probably where it's going to almost end up being a first round pick because it's going to be so early. But at the same time, you're talking about Brandon Aiyuk, a proven elite receiver who's still in the prime of his career, is going to probably be for another few years. So Judon in anything but a first, I would absolutely strongly consider because again, if you're trading Judon, it's probably because you couldn't figure anything out.
Exactly. You're not going to be missing much. I'm with you. All right, let's wrap it up with these two. From Bader THFC on Twitter. What do you expect from Keion White this year, the Patriots 2023 second round pick?
So I'm not going to do like stats or anything because especially with defensive linemen, stats can be so fickle. It's really hard to predict that kind of thing. I would say like towards the end of the season, you started to see he really was a full-fledged starter. Like he started to play more than Dietrich Wise. I think he'll be in the mix at outside linebacker a little bit, but if we're talking expectations, if he really is maturing the way that Gerard Mayo said he was and can be the kind of every down player that I think he has a skill set to be, I think he's someone who rarely leaves the field. Really. Yeah. I mean, you got Dietrich Wise and you got Anthony Jennings, Joshua Uche, possibly Matthew Judon. Like there are bodies there for sure. But still, Keion White has the skill set to be a true difference maker, like as an interior rusher, external or outside rusher. He's good in run defense where like you've seen him inside the offensive line, taking on double teams and standing his ground and holding the edge against like pullers. Like he can do pretty much anything he wants. I think it's going to be a matter of playing under control, diagnosing plays quickly, and understanding where his strengths and weaknesses lie. I would say this is probably going to be a breakout year for him. He'll have the opportunities. Again, Nick Judon is a really big piece here because I think he'll probably have to take on some of the load that they would lose from a Judon. And then with Dietrich Wise, still a good player, but he's played so much in his career at a tough position. Workload's been pretty big. I think we may see a step back from him. You kind of saw one last season. He wasn't bad, but wasn't as good or as productive, and like the quality wasn't quite what it was in other seasons. So especially if he takes a step back, I think you look at Keion White as kind of a Christian Barmore type where you're like, yeah, if he can play, we want to keep him on the field. Obviously, keep him fresh as well with all the rotation that you've got. But I think this is going to be a big year for him where he really puts it all together and just starts wrecking games.
Yeah, I'm excited for Keion. Like a guy who, he's – I think of them a lot too sometimes when I think about this stuff like off the field too. Like was a guy who was kind of quiet last year, didn't really say too much. And then like you see him at the Georgia Tech game, like in like a pretty sick fit. And I'm like, oh, this guy does have a personality. Maybe he's just kind of shy, doesn't want to talk, or kind of, I don't want to say scared of Bill Belichick, but it's just kind of, leaning in as a rookie and trying to find his footing.
Was scared of him.
Yeah, right. And yeah, seriously. And then this offseason, he kind of spoke out a little bit and was like, yeah, it's different, without Belichick. And I love Belichick, but, there's a bit of a looser vibe. I think he said something along those lines. And then Gerard Mayo mentioned during OTAs that he's kind of emerged as a leader off the field. So I'm excited to see, again, a second-round pick. I think he was the 37th overall pick last year. So, like, Patriots put in some legit and maybe it wasn't 37. 37 was Jalen Polk this year. But he was
early. He was getting first-round buzz. Like, he was
exactly.
Yeah,
right. He was at the draft, a high second-round pick. So, a guy who they put a lot of trust in, 2 years ago to bring him in here. So, I think he can contribute. And you're right. I think depending on what happens with Matthew Judon, that'll be massive for his stock because he'll just be able to see the field that much more. But I think he has all the tools to succeed at this level. And it's just a matter of putting it together. And I think he can do that this year.
Yeah, and I've also seen talk about like what his role is going to be exactly. And after studying it more, it's pretty much like, how Jelani Tavai is the adjuster where he goes on or off the line of scrimmage. Yeah. What Keion White and Dietrich Wise basically are the ones who adjust to that adjustment. So if Jelani Tavai goes down to the line of scrimmage, then Wise or White will kick inside is more like those, odd defensive end or more interior defensive lineman types. Yeah. Whenever Jelani Tavai pops out, those guys will be more like the outside kind of 4-3 type defensive ends. And then I also think that White's going to get some opportunities at linebacker where he kind of stands up and rushes that way. So, I've seen some confusion. How does he fit? Again, he can pretty much line up wherever he wants, but I would expect him to be in that more of a adjuster role and then maybe move around more in pass rushing situations.
Yeah. Well, I'm with you. All right. Last one. This one, kind of an interesting one, kind of a fun one, but they don't want to pay Godshot. It doesn't seem like they're obviously at a stalemate with the contract situation. Antonio Mafi doesn't have a place in the offensive line right now. And could they switch him back to nose tackle where he played at some point in college, Taylor?
I will push back on them not having a true nose tackle. I really do like Jeremiah Farms. And he pretty much did take over for Godshot a lot when he kind of got dinged up late last season. Daniel Aquale has also kind of been a rotational guy. Thought of as just a pass rusher, and he is undersized. Like, he and Farms are on the smaller side, but I think that this version of the Patriots may be willing to concede some of that size for guys who are more technically sound and give you pass rush upside. So I'll push back on that. I do like Farms and Aquale kind of as a tandem. I don't love it because Godshot does give you like a true 320 plus, but what is he, 350 or something like that? He put on weight. So in terms of that, yeah, they don't have that true space eater necessarily right now outside of him. Mafi, I don't know that you want to put him back on the defensive side of the ball. That feels more like a Jake Beckett kind of thing where you are so desperate and you're just like, this guy can't play this position. I don't think that would even happen this year. And actually, Jeremiah Farms was one of those guys. They switched him back and forth like 2 or 3 times. He was on offense and he was on defense. I don't think Mafi's there quite yet. I would give him at least one more season of seeing if he can take on more center responsibilities or if he can just be solid as a guard and give you, at least a really quality depth piece before I would start talking about trying to switch him and move his position again. Interesting, but I think it's too soon for that.
Definitely interesting. I like the thought because they've done this with guys too. Bill Murray was a guy too who kind of went back and forth a lot for the Patriots last offseason, and I think even the offseason before. So it's not unprecedented for them to try something like that, but I'm also not sold that Mafi doesn't have a place on the offensive line either. I don't know if I was, too quick to kind of think this was a thing, but I feel like they kind of have a place for Mafi at center, and I think they like what they've done with him there. He played there a lot. Again, I mentioned a lot while we did our offseason program shows, but he was playing a lot of center there too. I know Nick Leverett played there as well, but they're going to need a backup for David Andrews. They're going to need a plan for when David Andrews ultimately retires in the next couple seasons when DA finally gives it up. I don't think he's going to just yet. He seems like he's having too much fun playing football here. But they do need a backup plan at center, and I think he could be involved in that. So we'll see what happens. But I don't want to give up on Antonio Mafi just yet on the offensive line. I think he had a rough go of it last year, but I think he can look. It was his first year. He can improve. I liked what he did in college, so we'll see what happens there. That's gonna do it for our mailbag. Today on this Tuesday, me and Taylor will be back all week. We recorded a bunch of videos down in Foxborough today, so those will be coming out on the channel as the week goes on, leading up to training camp, which opens next Wednesday, July 24th. Patriots rookies report on Friday. So we are getting into the counting down these dog days of summer and getting into Patriot training camp. So, Taylor, what do you have coming down the pipe? Anything else as far as what we can sort of think about and plug before we get out of here and get ready for training camp?
Got a whole lot of videos coming down the pipe on some recent stuff and then the position battles and everything like that. As news keeps breaking, maybe we'll try to whip something up. We're kind of still in the phase of, wait and react. But next week I will have a couple of things dropping, so look out for that. But until then, just keep your eyes peeled. If anything breaks, you know where to look.
Love it. Subscribe to Patriots Press Pass. Check out all of our work on CLNSmedia.com. And as Taylor Kyles always says, take care of yourselves. Take care of each other. See you next time, y'all. Peace.